Everybody, Ghostblade1062 here with another locomotive review. Today, we will be looking at a Athearn Genesis ES44AC in the Canadian Pacific paint scheme, road number 8740. And this is a model that I have purchased secondhand. And this is also the last review video of the year 2025. And now, let's move on to the unboxing. Alright, taking a look at the box, on the front we have the Athearn Genesis logo. And this box is a bit scuffed up as it is a second-hand purchase, so it has seen some wear and tear. On the bottom we have the logo and an age restriction warning, as well as the Athearn website. The same applies to the top for the logo and website. The back of the box is blank, and then on the right side we have the Athearn Genesis logo, the website, as well as the Horizon Hobby logo. And finally, on the left side of the box, we actually have some product information. To start off with, we have the Athearn Genesis logo, as well as the Tsunami 2 logo, as this locomotive is equipped with a Tsunami 2 sound decoder. We have the product ID here, which is ATHG 83127 with sound. It is a Canadian Pacific ES44AC, road number 8740. And here we have the product barcode. And in the center we have a picture of the locomotive itself. And now, taking off the lid, we get access to our paperwork, starting with our user manual, which contains everything from parts replacement, care, lubrication, operating instructions, function chart, a list of the CVs, and I will say this is one of the most extensive lists of CVs that I've seen in an instruction manual. And finally, in the back we have the warranty. Then we have another warranty sheet, advertisement for the Athearn News, and another warranty card. And finally, taking off this soft foam topper, we get access to the clamshell that the locomotive sits in. And we have this little pocket here that includes a couple of spare parts. And now, sliding off the outer shell, we can open up the clamshell here. Which fits very snugly on the locomotive, keeping it safe and protecting it from damage. As well as we have the foam inserts here in between the main body and the handrail to protect the handrails from damage. And here we have the locomotive. And now we can move on to the detailed overview section of the video. Time to take a closer look at the locomotive. Starting at the head end here, we have our snowplow, from which we have protruding the brake lines as well as the air lines, which are all have this nice silver tipping, as well as we have the MU receptacle cable. Moving up, above the plow we have handrails going up to the front steps, to the front walkway here, which is corrugated. We also have just above the handrails our number boards, and on between the number boards we have the CP logo. We also have our steps going up to the top of the short hood with grab irons all around, as well as our two sand filler hatches. Then leading up to the windows, we have nice see-through windows with windshield wipers that are mounted on the windows and grab irons just above the windows. Moving on to the side, we can see we have our nice white lining on the steps here, making the steps more visible on the black. Then moving on below the cab windows here, we have our road number as well as locomotive typing. And we have nice framing on the windows here, which is nice and visible, but they do not move. Then moving on, we have our vent here, right before our AC converter cabinets, with more vents above that. We also have our handrails along the side here, which are separately fitted plastic. Looking at the trucks, we have some nice suspension detailing, as well as some brake detailing. And moving on to the fuel tank, on this side of the fuel tank, here just above we have our emergency shutoff. And then we have our fuel gauge here. Moving on, we have our very nicely detailed in access panels. And here towards the center of the locomotive, we have a set of steps leading up to the roof of the locomotive, with the Canadian Pacific logo nicely printed on the side. And moving further down, we have more exhaust vents and air intakes vents, as well as we have our separately fitted brake wheel here. Moving on to the back of the locomotive, we again have our plow as well as our brake lines, MU hoses, and electrical connections. We have our handrails again, and again we also have this chain here. We do not have any rear ditch lights on this locomotive. Then moving on to here, we have a storage for a fire extinguisher. And then we have just below the radiator, we have our road number on both sides here. And then we have our tail light of the locomotive. Moving on along this side here, most of the detailing here is the same, except we do not have the inverter cabinet on this AC inverter cabinet on this side. Instead, we have a rear cab door here. And looking at the fuel tank, it is set up differently on this side. Here we have our emergency shutoff near the front, as well as our fuel tank cap. We have our fuel gauge, but then we also have our 2 air reservoir tanks on this side. Looking at the bottom, we don't have any real additional detailing here. So let's move on to the roof of the locomotive. Starting at the front, we have our grab iron here for getting up on the roof from the front, from the short hood. And here we also have our PTC antenna arrays and air conditioning unit. We have various access hatches along the top here, as well as our 5-chime horn and our separately painted smokestack. And then we have our radiator, which is made out of etched plastic. And we have our visible fans underneath here as well. And that covers our overview of the locomotive detailing. And now, we'll move on to the rip track segment of the video. Alright, time for the rip track segment of the video. To start with, we're going to verify the wheel gauge of the locomotive with the NMRA standards gauge. And we'll start on the rear truck here. Axle 1 is good, axle 2 is good, and axle 3 is good. Now for the front truck, axle 1 is good, axle 2 is good, and axle 3 is good. So all of our axles are engaged, which is nice. And now we're going to verify the coupler height of the factory couplers before I move on to replace them with KD couplers. And that is just a personal choice. It is not something you need to do. So the front coupler is spot on. And now for the rear coupler. The rear coupler is sitting slightly low. So now, let's get this locomotive upside down. And I already got my 2 couplers here that I will be putting in. And in order to do so, we'll have to remove the coupler box. And the screws on this are quite long. I think I got it though. Okay. The screw is actually a little bit stuck. There we go. Right, that is the front coupler box. And the new coupler just sits in like this. And it moves back and forth with no problem. Oh, but I lost my spring on the coupler shank here. I'll have to reattach that after, and that is a bit more of a delicate process, so I'll do that off camera. But putting the coupler back in. Okay. We have it securely fastened in and the coupler moves properly. That's the rear coupler changed over. Now for the front coupler. Come on. What are you catching on? There we go. That's the front coupler box out. New coupler in. Oh, I'm sitting crooked here. Alright, this front coupler box is giving me some grief. So what I will do is briefly cut, and I'm going to get that put in straight, as well as replace the spring on the rear coupler. And then we will verify the coupler height on the new Katy couplers that I've installed. Alright, I'm back now. I have gotten the front coupler put in properly. I don't know why I couldn't get it on camera, but as soon as I tried off camera, it went in perfectly fine. And I got the spring put in the rear coupler. So those are both ready to go. So now let's verify the coupler height. And starting with the front coupler here, we are at proper height, though the trip pin is a little bit low, so I'll adjust that a little bit off camera. And now for the rear coupler. We are low. Okay, I'll need to do some adjustments as I have some sag on the rear coupler here. But otherwise, I'll get that done up off camera, and then we'll take the locomotive over to the track for a test run. Alright everybody, I've got the locomotive put over onto the track now. I have gone through and reset the decoder to factory before changing the DCC address to the road number. And now, let's start with an overview of the functions that this locomotive has. So we'll turn on the track power. And automatically we get the startup sequence. And now giving it some acceleration on speed step 1. It is moving forward, though a little bit jerky, but that smoothens right out on speed step 2. Now on to function 0, the directional lighting. We have our headlight and our tail light, which change with the direction of travel. Function 1 is our bell. Function 2 is the horn. Function 3 is the short horn, at least by default, but I will change that particular CV over, this being right in the notes here, that by turning CV37 to 0, which I am doing right now, we actually get a grade crossing horn instead for this function. Now, moving on, function 4 is the dynamic brakes. And we can hear the brake fans really kick in under that. Function 5 turns on the ditch lights. Function 6, if the locomotive was equipped with it, would enable flashing ditch lights. Function 7 is a dimmer and cab chatter. Function 8 is the mute function. Function 9 is the half volume function. Function 10 is the sanding. Function 11 is the brake set and release, which is not enabled by standard. Function 12 is brake select. Function 13 is coupler sounds. Function 14 is half speed and momentum override. Which that actually gives a lot better control over the locomotive. Function 15 is the handbrake. Function 16 is HEP mode. Which is a function I am not familiar with. Function 17 is fueling. Function 18 is the general service sequence. Function 20 is the steam generator on and off. Function 23 is an all aboard announcement. 26 is RPM notch up. And 27, our last function, is RPM notch down. And now, we'll get some run-by of the locomotive, footage of the locomotive with a freight train. Well, and we're caught on the switch. Looks like I need to do some adjustments. I just noticed a couple of spots of track that are out of it. They're rail joiners. Come on, there we go. Alright everybody, this concludes my review of the Athearn Genesis ES44AC in the Canadian Pacific paint scheme road number 8740. By ways of detailing, the Locomotive was very well done. The detailing is very intricate, the writing is legible, and I really can't complain in that regard. By ways of functionality, however, I do find that the Locomotive is a little bit lacking in certain aspects, such as the speed control, as it kicks up in speed very quickly and slows down just as quickly instead of the nice gradual slowing down. And this is with me resetting the decoder to factory from whatever the previous owner had set it to. And there was a number of functions that are mentioned in the booklet that do not actually function on the Locomotive, as they are programmed in, but the Locomotive isn't equipped to utilize these functions, which doesn't make any sense to me to even have these functions. You also cannot manually shut the Locomotive on and off by ways of the prime mover sounds. The moment it has track power, it turns on the prime mover, and the only way to shut it off is to either mute it or to cut track power, which is something I'm not exactly happy about. But aside from that, it is still a very nice piece. And that's really all I can say on the matter. That being said, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and a comment, and have a Happy New Year.